Hi, Joyce.
Hello.
As always, with these interviews, I'm going to jump in with a really juicy question before I introduce you all to Joyce. And Joyce, I wanted to know, can you tell me what legal structure is best for artists when they're just starting out, probably not making much money, if any, and they want tax filing to be super easy?
Well, that is a super juicy question.
I like them.
Yay, great. Um, for the most part, for most artists, I would advise for tax purposes, advise a LLC,
Mm-hmm.
um, or and my second would probably be an S corp, but usually a LLC because they can because the filing requirements are extremely simplistic for a single member LLC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would advise.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah, I recently went LLC and I was
mhm.
all caught up in the should I do a sole member or a partnership? And I did choose sole member, so I'm glad to hear you say that, even if it might be a little different since I'm not operating as an artist.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the tax filing is pretty simple. Joyce and I have talked about that before, and that you can file things within your own personal tax returns, which makes it super simple, right? Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Okay, so today, now that we've got our first question out of the way, today I'm talking with Joyce M. Washington, as she goes by online her full name. And she is a
Yes.
CPA, which is an accountant for those of you who don't know, and she is also a virtual CFO, which is Chief Financial Officer. Joyce, can you tell us more about what you do?
Sure. As far as a CPA, that can be a little bit more complicated, so we're not going to get too much into that. But it's primarily a license that is, we got to go through tests and all that good stuff, but it's a state issued license. And stands for Certified Public Accountant. Um, so you will have accountants that have that designation. So it's always good to have, but not necessary to be an accountant actually. So you can still be an accountant and not be a CPA. As far as a virtual CFO, if you kind of think about the traditional business structures where you would have a CEO or a chief executive officer. Typically, when you have a CEO, you would also have maybe a COO or a chief operating officer and a CFO or a chief financial officer.
Mm-hmm.
And what the CFO's primary function is to basically watch over the finances of a business and to do the things uh, that are prudent in order for that business to sustain itself, to grow itself, all those good things. So kind of like being the financial right hand man or woman for the CEO. So you have like the operating person that is in charge of all the operations, but you also have the financial person that's primarily in charge of the finances for the business, and then you have the executive officer, which what most business owners consider themselves. So that's pretty much what a CFO, when you kind of carve it out, what they traditionally do. And as far as being a virtual CFO, I kind of take the traditional and take it to the virtual level, primarily working with small business owners because small business owners won't need a full-time CFO, but from time to time they may need somebody to advise them on the financial matters in their business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do.
That's fantastic that you do that too, because I know I've needed it before, and it's great to have you as a connection for that. We were actually just talking before we hit record about certain things in my business, and Joyce knows what she's talking about. It was really helpful. Um, Now, I follow Joyce online, and I know that she gets this particular question like all the time. Like, probably at least 50% of the questions she gets asked are this particular question.
Okay.
But I'm still going to ask her what her favorite apps are for tracking business finances.
You're right. I do get it all the
All the
time.
time.
Well, because I am a virtual, and I am a virtual business, and I do advise a lot of virtual small business owners. I kind of have gotten away from um, desktop applications, so I'm not as much of a QuickBooks lover as I used to be because that one is primarily a desktop driven application. So I am a cloud based person. So my top three that I really love are Zero Accounting, and that's zero spelled with an X. It's Xero. My second one is Wave Accounting, and I believe they have changed their website to waveapps.com.
That sounds
And
fun.
my third is FreshBooks. FreshBooks has it started as an invoice driven application, but they have added some accounting functions to their application. So I'm liking what I'm saying in the direction that they're going. So
Yeah.
so those are my top three ones.
I
So
love it. I just started with Wave, and I'm still trying to get the lay of the land, but I do like it thus far. It sends me like weekly updates, so I don't forget to look at it, because that can happen.
yes,
Yeah, that's actually really common to forget to look at it, for me at
yes.
least. So is it okay to just track things with pen and paper? Is that like still kosher?
I think for a beginner, I think that's actually the best way to start off because it gets you in the habit of really tracking and really being on top of tracking
Mm-hmm.
your income and your expenses. So, I mean, even if, to take it a step beyond the pen and paper, even if you're still on the spreadsheet level,
Yeah.
that's fine too. At the end of the day, to me, it really doesn't matter which application you use, as long as whatever you are doing consistently.
Okay. So keeping so what do you think is a good like consistency amount when you're starting out and you're not making transactions every day? Like monthly, quarterly?
Um, at a minimum, monthly,
Mhm.
because it's very easy for all of us to, with business banking, most of the time they come with a little debit card. So with that debit card, it's very easy to just go in the store and swipe away, right?
Yeah.
And let's say 2 months later, because your transactions are so infrequent, that maybe you don't look at them every month or every 2 months or even for the entire year because they're that infrequent. So a year later, when you're trying to get together your documents for your accountant to do your taxes, you don't know what that transaction was from last January.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, I would advise to look at the transactions at least once a month because at a once a month stage, it's still somewhat fresh in your head
Yeah.
that if you went to Walgreens to pick up a ream of paper,
Yeah.
that you remember that that's what it was for.
Yeah. That's
That,
actually good advice on the personal level too.
right, that if you look at it at least on a monthly basis, that it's still somewhat fresh in your mind what the transactions were for.
Okay.
And even like say if you take a colleague out to lunch or something like that, you still remember, if you went to your favorite restaurant or whatever, you still remember, oh, I went to lunch with Laura and we discussed so and so. These are the kind of things that you need to document for tax purposes. So, within a 3 to 4 week window is when I think people tend to start forgetting, what it was for and who they may have been with, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I would say at least once a month.
Yeah.
As you get busier, and you have more transactions, then I would advise once a week. and
Mm-hmm.
just pick a day where, it doesn't have to take you very long. I mean, sometimes it may take you 10 minutes, but if you get in there and you do it consistently, then, maybe every Monday morning you go in and you assign your transactions and you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Yeah, I know how easy it is to like get confused on things. Well, usually in my personal accounting, that's how that happens. Is that I'll
Yeah.
let it go for too long. I'm pretty good about the business accounting, but in the personal, I've done it before, where then like the name on the transaction, whatever official legal way they've put it down in their credit card processor, it comes through, and you have no idea what it is. We had this problem with a gas station one time. They called themselves Campus Store because they're a gas station near the local university. And
Mm-hmm.
when we moved here, we could not figure out what Campus Store was. We haven't bought anything on the campus. We haven't even been to the. And it was
Right.
like, it took us forever to figure out that it was the gas station. And it helps if you actually go in there, pretty quickly after
Yeah.
it's done. You can remember how much you spent, and you can figure out, oh yeah, that was the gas station. You'll be a
Yeah.
little
What's the
less
gas?
perplexed. So I think that's true too, even if you don't have a lot of transactions with your business stuff. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's more than you think when you actually come down to it. You're purchasing, you needed a paintbrush, or, you needed some gesso, or whatever is just like
Right.
some little supply or a little thing, and you might end up buying it somewhere that you don't normally buy it. You're in Walmart already, and you buy the copy paper right there, and, you can end up
Right.
getting confused and getting things lost. And with that comes the whole idea of like, especially if you're a sole proprietor, when you're starting out, and the sole proprietor, for those of you who don't know, is like the most simple kind of running a business that you can possibly have, where you file taxes on your own, personal tax forms. You don't really have a separate anything. Everything's kind of you, and the only thing you do is at the end of the year when you file the taxes, you separate out your transactions. So sole proprietorship is like, you're barely a business.
Mm-hmm.
So especially if you are a sole proprietor, is it important to still have a separate bank account for your transactions to go through for your business? Or can you keep it all in with your personal, since all you have to do is just kind of keep track of a few things here and there that are business?
I think for everybody's sanity, I think both for your sanity and, and ultimately, at first it may be easy enough for you to do your own tax work, but at some point, most people do gravitate to using a tax person. So, for everybody's sanity, I would suggest having a separate bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, at this point, it's so easy to open a separate bank account, even if it's a separate personal account that you only run business transactions through.
Mm-hmm.
Would work. So, getting a free checking account at your credit union, or at the same bank that your personal account is at,
Mm-hmm.
would work. So yeah, I would totally say keep a separate bank account, just so that it, even if you are a sole proprietor,
Mm-hmm.
just so you can have something for record keeping purposes. So even if you don't use one of the apps that we talked about, at a bare minimum, we could then just look at your bank account and say, these are the transactions, and we can figure out where stuff goes. And, and for tax time, kind of just look at that account, and this is your business stuff, and everything else is your personal stuff. Mm-hmm. Instead of, having to comb through your personal transactions, every month. Like, was that deposit personal or business? Was that expense personal or business? That can, that can be time consuming. And and highlighting them on your bank statements, and needing to add them up and using a spreadsheet, and I've seen it all. So yeah. So I mean, I think just for sanity purposes, even from the very beginning, to just open another bank account. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a secondary personal account,
Mm-hmm.
and running all your hobby transactions. I mean, because a lot of us start our businesses as hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if, you're still at the hobby stage, just go ahead and open a free checking account, and, if they have that $100 minimum, open it with that $100, and keep it in there so you won't be charged a monthly fee or whatever. And just keep rolling with using that particular bank account to, grow your business,
Mm-hmm.
grow your hobby into a business.
Yeah. I think that
So,
makes sense. And then it's easier, the process is easier when you do become more of a business. It's all there. And even when you're at the hobby stage, you can see whether you're actually bringing in money or
right. It
rapidly
makes
losing
it
it.
it makes it very easy to just kind of figure out whether or not you're making money or not at a
Mm-hmm.
glance, just about.
And then you know if you're
Because you'll
viable.
know, have I made any deposits into my, into my special account?
Yeah.
Or am I only spending money out of it? Am I only buying supplies, but I'm not, I'm not making any money
Mm-hmm. Yep.
quite yet. So,
I think
so
that's
you'll
smart.
know when you've transitioned from hobby to business, just from following that one account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's real smart. So jumping kind of off of that, I'm reading off my questions, trying to figure out what else I wanted to do next. So when you buy something by accident, maybe out of your personal funds instead of out of your business account, what do you do with that when tax time rolls around and you've like screwed up? Should you find that transaction or just consider it a personal transaction or what?
I think it would depend on how much impact it really has on your business. I mean, if it's a couple of dollars and it really doesn't have that much of an impact one way or the other, then maybe just the whole reimbursement process might be more trouble than it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
But if, for instance, it's not one transaction but 10, and they total about $200, and maybe your total expenses for the year are only $100, then
Mm-hmm.
that makes it more of a majority number,
Yeah.
that it makes sense for you to reimburse yourself from your business
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that business expense is reported and flows through the business
Mm-hmm.
adequately.
So weigh it based on impact in your business and
Yeah, I
decide
think it.
based on
I
that.
think it primarily would just depend on how much of an impact it makes, and and if it really, if you really absolutely need it to flow through
Mm-hmm.
your business or not. Um, Usually, what I'll do is, because occasionally I'll do it myself. Like, you end up in Walmart and you're buying personal stuff and business stuff, and who wants to do two different transactions and
Mm-hmm.
on different cards and remembering this, that, and the third. But so what I'll do
Excuse me.
sometimes is I'll have a due to owner account. So I know that I went to Walmart or whatever, and I used my personal account or whatever, and I owe myself that money from the business.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so then maybe quarterly you kind of reconcile that amount and you pay yourself that amount back.
Yeah.
So that's typically what I'll do and what I've advised clients to do. I mean, because it's just, I mean, as small business owners, it can become a bit of a nightmare to have to, move, to have to pay using separate accounts and all that good stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes we only have one account. Like, let's say, for instance, I had a guy that does voiceovers. So, his iTunes account is technically a personal account. So, but he knew when he was buying music for a customer, and he knew when he was buying music for himself.
Mm-hmm.
So all of it would flow through the business, and he would just reimburse the business when he bought personal stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what, that's an instance of, running it through one of the other and reimbursing,
Mm-hmm.
either the entity for your personal stuff or vice versa. If, you paid for it with your personal account, now the business owes you money.
Right. Yeah. That
So
makes sense.
So it's just a matter of figuring out which way you want it to work, and
Mm-hmm.
then doing it consistently, and then just kind of, reconciling it and reimbursing yourself, maybe monthly or quarterly or even yearly or whatever. So.
And reminding yourself that you are not your business. They're two separate
Right.
things.
That they're, that the business is a separate person.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
yes,
the
you can
business
owe the
owes
business
money,
money.
or I owe the
Yeah.
business money.
Yep. We're on the same page. I gotcha. Okay, so artists are pretty regularly, we make money in like bigger batches. Like spring will be like nothing, there'll be no transactions at all, nothing's happening. And then like summer hits and everybody's moving, and suddenly you've got this influx of people trying to buy things to decorate their new homes with, and so then there you've got tons of art sales. So are there any like precautions financially that you would suggest people take, maybe budget wise or something, to deal with these polarized seasons of income?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, I think for startups it can be hard, because you don't really know what your seasons are gonna be like
Yeah.
quite yet. Um, so I think on the front end, I would, just be somewhat cautious not to spend everything that you earn.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people, it's just like, oh, the money's there, I'll spend it.
Yeah.
So I would, on the front end, at least for the first year, because you don't know how your sales are going to go, especially if you're a local artist, and not necessarily a virtual artist. That I would be more concerned about, the building myself to the point of the business sustaining itself and me not having to put money into it. So budgeting wise, a lot of people try to budget by the year, but I would probably try to budget by the quarter, especially for the first year, maybe two. Um, not really looking too far ahead, but, no more than 90 days, maybe 180 days. So that's 3 to 6 months ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And what money is going to come in, what short-term things can I possibly do? Because I think we all have the capacity. We don't all necessarily have the desire to teach, but I think we all kind of have the capacity to teach.
Mm-hmm.
That we are all the expert at something. So, maybe it's that, as an artist, that maybe they teach ceramic classes, or, other things to kind of supplement the income that's not necessarily their flagship or their big money maker.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially, if you're looking at your 6 month budget and you see that crap is getting cold. If we look at 6 month budgets now, we will be talking about October, November, December, January, February, March. Very cold months. Mm-hmm. So probably not a whole lot of, opportunities for, outside type,
knitwear.
Not a lot of people moving, not a whole lot of painting being commissioned, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you got Christmas, but like knitwear might be something that would be really good in the
like a whole lot of
winter.
Sweaters and scarves might be,
whereas
might be moving, but
whereas the other,
but, yeah, I mean, and if you're into ceramics, maybe some really cool mugs and stuff like that might be sold around this time, but that probably wouldn't be sold during the summer.
Yeah.
So I mean, even as an artist, just trying to figure out what your product lines might even be, because those might be cyclical as well. Because like you're saying, if I'm if I'm an artist and I knit, then maybe the summers suck for me, but the winters are great.
Yeah.
So, and maybe I figure out a way to do maybe lightweight knits for the summer. Maybe crochet dresses and stuff like that. I mean, just trying to figure out what your product lines, what products might work a little bit better for the different seasons, and then budgeting accordingly. Because it starts with the product and then flows with the, with into the money part. So yeah, I mean, that's, I guess what I would suggest, especially for startups, is to really, at the beginning, not to look too far ahead. I mean, business planners try to tell you need this five-year plan, and I think that's unrealistic for somebody that's really starting out, that you can barely see past 30 days.
Yeah.
So, if 30 days feels comfortable, then sit in that 30-day pocket and just keep looking 30 days ahead. And until you can look 60 days, and until you can look 90 days, and then just kind of stretch it out a little bit at a time to where you get to 6 months, and then you get to 12 months, and then you get to 24 months, where you can be, where your business becomes more predictable. At the beginning, it's not predictable at all.
Yeah.
So, and you can't be afraid to change with it, because that's kind of, that to me, that's one of the amazing and dynamic benefits of being a small business owner. That unlike, like say a huge business, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, like, I don't know, like Michael's, like Michael's art supply.
Yeah.
I mean, they have planned their marketing for probably 6 months to a year in advance.
Yeah.
So if something drastic changed in the world today, they would have a very difficult time changing it. They would have to, they would have all these mechanics and systems that they would have to go through, and approval processes that they would have to go through in order to change something. Whereas, as small micro business owners, we can wake up today and say, oh, I think I'll release a product on November 1st.
Yeah.
And, or I mean, it's, right now it's September 23rd.
Yeah.
And, we could be like, yeah, I think I'll do a new product on October 1st.
Yeah.
And we could absolutely do that. Based on, various things in our market, we could absolutely do that. And a big business or a big brand can't do that. So I think that's one of the amazing and dynamic things that we can do that they can't. And I think we should use that a little bit more to our advantage. That, you can change on a dime if you want. So don't etch things in stone so much. Be a little bit more fluid. Be a little bit more flexible with, even your budgets. I mean, your budgets you can do a 12-month budget, but just in the back of your mind, know that it will probably change. And that isn't the worst thing in the world.
No, especially since it probably changes for the better.
Right.
You're probably making more money than you thought.
Hopefully it's changing for the better, that your business is growing and you're doing a lot better. So, you have to change the budget in accordance to that. So
yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Gotta get excited about it. So tax time.
Yeah.
Taxes. I think that a lot of people, with small businesses that they've just started, or they're kind of, I just think people are clueless about deductions. What kind of things can you deduct from like an art business?
Um,
Like
for
your studio space?
yes,
Yeah?
yeah. Um, for an artist, I would say, studio space, supplies, of course. Um, advisors that they may need to work with if they work with a business coach. That's technically a business service that they're using. So that would be, something that would be deductible, legal fees, accounting
Financial
fees,
fees, yes.
um, website fees. I mean, things that, if I can draw a line directly to your business, then I would say probably more likely than not, then it's a tax deductible expense. I wouldn't get too carried away with it though. I mean, some people get a little wonky with it, but for the most part, I would say if it's something that I can tie directly to your business, then yeah, I would.
Okay.
I would definitely say that it's deductible.
So when you go to put them in on your taxes, do you have to like explain what the things were to be able to get deductions, or is there like some sort of distinction you have to make that these are things that were expenses, or does it just happen because you've already put those transactions in?
For the most part, I would say that that typically, like say for instance, like with Wave, the categories are structured in such a way that it pretty much has categories, and the chart of accounts is categorized in such a way that it's about the tax deductions ultimately. I mean, you'll see, categories or accounts like supplies and fees or merchant service fees and stuff like that. So ultimately, once you get to, and if we're talking about a single member LLC, you'll most likely be filing a Schedule C on your personal 1040. And on that Schedule C, there's an income section. Then there's like this cost of goods sold line. So you'll just put the one number there. And, and as artists, I'm assuming you're familiar with cost of goods sold. So, that's, your direct expenses. Like say for instance, if we're talking about crocheters and knitters, so one of their direct expenses or one of their cost of a good sold would be the yarn that they buy. So whatever you actually using, the materials you actually use that ultimately become your product that you sell. So that would be a cost of goods sold.
Okay.
And then you have your what we call indirect costs, which would be stuff like business coaching, advertising, marketing, licensing fees, if you happen to have those.
Does that include
which
tools?
Like when you filed for your LLC, that's technically a licensing fee. So that would go on your licensing fee line. So on that particular form, that Schedule C, there are line items.
Okay.
And then let's say you have stuff that don't fit, then it would go on the other line, and it would be a complimentary schedule where it would outline all the stuff that didn't fit somewhere else that you would like to deduct, and you would just add it up, and then it flows to the schedule, which then flows to your 1040, and then boom, you're done.
Where would you put tools like paintbrushes or things that don't directly become the product, but they are? Would that also be in with your what was the second one?
I would call those like indirect supplies. Yeah, indirect. So there might not be a specific line for that, so that would probably end up in other. So, and I would just call those paint supplies. Okay. So if you're a painter and, and you just kind of re-up on your different colors of paints and, and things of that nature,
Knitting
or you
needles.
haven't been, commissioned to do a particular piece. So I mean, even you might even put your shoot, I can't even think of the name. It just totally skipped me just that second.
That's okay.
But yeah, you're very surprised that if you don't have a particular customer that you attribute those things to, you can just put them in paint supplies and work it from there.
Yeah, and so your tools would be supplies, not materials. There's like a distinction there. That makes sense. Okay. So I think that was the only thing I wanted to ask about taxes. Yeah, that was it. I'm making sure I stick to the list. Now, I didn't even give Joyce the list ahead of time, so I can change it however I want.
Yes.
So Joyce is like pretty killer on getting rid of the billable hour. And I'd love to hear some tips about pricing art without worrying about how much time you spent on it, but still kind of being fair to yourself and like making sure you break even, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of juicy.
Yeah.
Okay, so for an artist, what would I advise for an artist? Well, for an artist, I think I would mostly go with. That one's kind of hard.
You don't have to solve all our problems.
It's very subjective.
Yeah.
As far as value given. Because they do actually end up with a physical product. But if we're talking about an artist, maybe a performing artist, then the performing artist can probably price per session, like, how many dates they're going to show up for. And I mean, because you can't really say, well, our show is going to be 3 hours. It's going to be however long the people want you to play. I mean, without being unreasonable, you know what I mean? You can't play for 24 hours and be paid the same price. But maybe that particular session might be an hour and a half, whereas the next day it might be 3 hours. But, it's the same performance, so to speak. So, just trying to figure out what the pricing would be based upon what your, I guess, popularity is, what your performances are, what you plan to bring to the table, those kinds of things. So you want to think about the value given more than the time spent.
Yeah.
So
I think that still applies, especially if you're like commissioning. I think it still applies for product-based artists, especially if you're like commissioning work where you might tell them like, okay, I'm going to knit you a sweater versus and give them a price point for that sweater versus counting that it took you 50 hours to make the sweater and then trying to charge them like a couple $1,000s or something. That's unreasonable.
Right.
People are going to pay that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, and this is why I don't necessarily like the billable hour, is that ultimately, let's say, for instance, you are a new knitter, and so it takes you longer to do a more complicated, say, cable knit or whatever, or a particular stitch. It takes you longer to do it because you haven't mastered it quite yet. So maybe you price that sweater at $100 because it took you 5 hours to knit it. But let's say 2 weeks from now, you've now made 10 of these sweaters, and it now takes you 2 hours to make the sweater instead of 5. So because you've become more proficient at this particular stitch. So should you now charge $40 for the sweater, or should you continue to charge $100 for the sweater because that's what the value of the sweater is? In my opinion, you continue to charge $100 for the sweater because you have now gone from novice to expert in this particular space.
You maybe even up the price because you're better at it, and the knit is
now 150 instead of 100.
Yeah.
And maybe you use different yarns. Maybe use a better quality yarn, et cetera, and you outline all of those things that, you know, maybe I use this cashmere yarn or whatever, or this very rare hand dipped,
alpaca,
you know, hand dipped yarn, you know.
Yes.
So there would be different ways to express the value of that particular piece, and why that particular piece is priced. The price point of that particular piece is different than another one. So yeah, you would need to factor all of those things into it, and not necessarily the hours that it takes you to actually create a piece. Because, like I said, once you become an expert or become more proficient at a particular style or a particular creative process, then it will not take you as long. Yes. So the hour becomes irrelevant for you. Your time isn't any less valuable. It's just that it just doesn't take you as long.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've written about this on my blog before, and it's really interesting how our culture sort of puts so much value on time versus results. And I kind of think results are more important, and I think that we're getting closer and closer. More and more people are starting to put value on results. And you do see in even in like mass-produced things, like in jewelry. Even mass-produced jewelry, they up the price. You know, they factor, they do all the calculations of how much it costs them to make, but then they sometimes times it by like 10 before they get to the retail price. So they're basing it on time it takes and materials and, you know, really formulaic stuff, they kind of in the end are they're assigning it a value based on how much they think it's worth, because they're charging so much more than how much it costs. So I think we are kind of moving away from it. Yeah. Yeah, you see that too? I think that'd be good. So. It's probably good. Probably good for society.
I think so. I think the more we focus more on the value basis of it, and I think time savings, because a lot of us can do a lot of the things that we buy, or, you know, I mean, I can sew my own clothes if I really wanted to, but I just don't. Yeah. I just don't want to take the time to do it. You know, I could knit a sweater if I absolutely needed to, but I don't want to. I'd rather just go to the store and buy it, or I'd rather, you know, find you know, go to Etsy or whatever, find a one of a kind sweater or whatever, and buy it.
Yeah. Pick something that's been designed and done for you.
Right. I mean, you know, and it's something that person enjoys doing. I don't enjoy sewing. So why should I? You know, so
I agree. I still can't use a sewing machine without like jumping when I press on the pedal, because it makes so much noise.
Right.
And every single time I jump, and it's like, come on. You know, how old are you?
Right. You knew it was coming. But right? You jump anyway.
I jump anyway. Every time. It's crazy. Okay, so I have one. Well, it looks like it might be like 2 more questions, depending on how you answer. I might ask more questions, but this is kind of the last question. I wanted to know, how do you know whether you should be investing more in your business, like in educational products, or in hiring somebody to help you with legal or financial matters, or, you know, investing in things when you don't have that kind of money actually in your business right now, and it's things that would be coming out of your personal. How do you know when it's time to make investments versus when you need to hold back and say, I need to make more money before I do this?
When you need to cut yourself off?
Yes. When do you cut yourself off? She's laughing because we kind of touched on this.
We kind of talked about this earlier. Yes. I think this one is a very personal thing. I think it really kind of boils down to personality types and and kind of what you I think as the business owner, I mean, because now let's talk about you being a CEO, because you're not just an artist, or you're not just a crafter, but you are a CEO of a business as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as the CEO of a business, you have to make decisions for your business as far as how swiftly you want the business to grow. Are you a do-it-yourselfer type? If you are a do-it-yourselfer type, then you will be investing in programs and learning things yourself. If you are not a do-it-yourselfer type, then you will probably be investing in building your team sooner than later. So that's kind of how you can decide whether or not you will be one of those that I'm going to hire a virtual assistant to take care of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're going to be one of those, I'm going to buy a class to teach me how to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Because either way, X, Y, and Z have to get done.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's just a matter of, am I going to invest in a class so that I know how to do it? Or am I going to invest in, maybe a team member, a contractor that I can hire from time to time in order to do that particular thing in my business?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where the investigation kind of goes. You kind of have to figure out, you're at this fork in the road and you have more things on your plate than you can handle yourself. Are you going to go left and hire somebody, or are you going to go right and figure out how you can possibly add more hours to your day?
Yeah.
And just get it done. And sometimes it's just a matter of figuring out some systems and getting it done yourself. And sometimes it is a matter of, I absolutely can't put another thing on my plate, and or I don't want to, because I only want to work 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of knowing yourself and knowing what you want your business to be like, how you envisioned it to be, and kind of going from there.
Mm-hmm.
And investing accordingly.
Yeah.
That sometimes it's gonna hurt a little bit, and sometimes it's gonna take you putting personal money into it. Especially when the sales aren't coming like you thought they might.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's kind of the where you get into the budget process.
Right.
That if you kind of have to figure out what level of risk you're willing to take on your business. And by risk, what I mean by that is, how much money are you willing to put into your business that you might not ever get out?
Yeah.
Is that $100? Is that $1,000? Is it $10,000?
And it's such a personal decision.
Right. So, I mean, we can't kind of, broad stroke it and say, at this point you got to cut yourself off. But you kind of have to evaluate what your risk level is, and just, if you budget wisely, if you really look at, okay, if I buy these supplies, then I'll be able to create X amount of things. And maybe they don't sell immediately, but maybe they sell eventually. I'll be able to make X amount of dollars from it. And you'll know, like, maybe over the course of 3 months, you make X amount of dollars, but you've invested into the business, Y amount, and it's less than what you'll be able to make. So to me, that's a wise investment, and it's not as risky as you might originally have thought when you just looked at the dollar amount.
Yeah. I think that that's true with everything. Yeah, to do kind of an analysis of what you think you could make back from it and when that would be, and then you have a really good picture of as to whether or not this is something you can just really see everything right there. Like this is how much it cost, and that's the upfront, and this is when I could expect to make it back, and this is how much work I have to put in before I can make it back, and that sort of stuff. I think that you're right that would really clarify a lot for you and make it a lot easier to make that decision.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so that was definitely all the questions that I have. Now we are question free, except for I wanted to know where we can find you online, and I'll pop it up on the screen when I edit.
Okay. Well, you can find me a couple of places, but the main place you can find me is on my website, which is thecommonsense.com.
Okay.
And I blog mostly regularly. I'm working on that.
Yeah.
But you can also find me on Twitter and on Facebook at The Common Sense again. So those are my handles there, and it's me. It's not somebody else. Usually people see how many followers I have and they're like, it's not her on Twitter. Yes, it's me on Twitter. So if you say hi, I will say hi back. And we can chat on Twitter and we can chat on Facebook. It's me on Facebook too. So pop on over. Feel free to post on the wall on Facebook, and we can chat. You know, if you have questions, Laura posts questions all the time, and I will respond as soon as I see it.
Yep.
So, but yeah, that's where I am mostly.
If you
on my blog, on Facebook, and on Twitter.
If you head to Joyce's website where her blog is, you'll also see that she has a free video series that's about kind of achieving perfect pricing, which is probably really helpful for everybody. I think I remember going through that and finding it pretty helpful, but I went through it so long ago that I'm like, was that the one that I did? It's been so gosh darn long that I've been following you. Joyce and I have been friends for several years now. So, go ahead and hop over to her site, which I have linked. You can see it up there because it'll be somewhere over there in editing mode. And it's also below the video in clickable mode, so you can click on over and grab her freebie with that video series, which is awesome. And then find her on Facebook, scroll down and find my questions, and you can see what's bugging me about my own financial issues. That's like a peek behind the scenes of Laura's business. And it was absolutely awesome talking to you. You've been really helpful. And hopefully we will do it again sometime with more hard questions.
Sure.